technology. So I kept thinking about that with, while I was reading this, is like how technology is enabling us to live and survive, and, as a species. So that's what I was thinking.
I'm Mary Remeyer, and I think sometimes in terms of disastrous circumstances in the environment or in just natural disasters, that only the people that have gone camping and only the children whose parents have taken them camping will know how to survive. Because we do everything now with so many technical things. They don't know how to do things without daily tasks.
I'm Barb Wenzinger, and I always think I would be the ultimate survivor. However, I've just been 2 hours at my house without any power, and I've been wandering around trying to decide what to do.
I'm Mary Ellen Voetsberger, and when I think of survival, I think of it in as a physical survival or emotional survival. There's a lot of different kinds of ways in which we're asked to survive in different situations.
I'm Florence Murray, and I'd say in regards to survival that there are always people around us who are trying to survive, and if we give out a hand, we're going to find there's a lot of people who can use that help.
I think the humans, I'm Connie, and I've been here at the library for a bazillion years, so I have survived. The human spirit knows no limits. I thought a lot about the plane crash in the Andes as I was reading this book, thinking of the Paul Pierce Reed book about the soccer team that resorted to cannibalism. So I thought about that. But in matters of health and personal fortitude, when the chips are down, I think that the human spirit has no limits. We're meant to survive. However, in the terms of camping, I think staying at the Ramada is camping as opposed to staying at the Marriott. So I may not survive because I'm not a camper.
I'm Alice Holly, and I agree with Mary Ellen. Your levels of survival depend on day to day. What you count on for, like, I had no hot coffee this afternoon. That's survival for me, to come here and get a cup of hot coffee. But you run into emergencies here and there, and you either adjust to your emergencies and survive them. And the easiest way to do that in some instances is to just think back on somebody who's less fortunate than you in surviving instances. And you're always ahead. You're always ahead. You're always surviving.
I'm Joan Gerber, and I'm Ida Rupp Library person. I spend a lot of time reading and coming here for books. Well, I think survival has many definitions today. We're not faced with being out in the rough, although I've done camping and have had some experiences with being really wondering if we're going to get through things. But I also worry about the population surviving because of the technology that is keeping people into their little mechanical and technical things. And I was on the elevator today, and this girl walked on. She didn't even get the door closed, and she was looking at her little book and doing her little texting. So I think if I can survive this technology, that's a form of survival.
I'm Bev Kendall, and we were without electricity today also. And I wouldn't be here at all if my mate had not come by with his car to bring me here. So I think survival does depend on the people around you too.
All right, I'm of course Dave Bush, and I'm going to talk about survival more later, so I don't really want to get into it too much now. You guys hit on a lot of the issues that I think about when I do my studies, and of course as a prisoner of war, their main objective is survival, and they're subjected to a lot of different types of conditions. So I'll be interjecting a little bit of that in this process as we go. But sounds really, really, really good. Thus far, the program, those that have been here before, have you been enjoying the program? Is it going well?
Yes.
Yeah, good, all right. Just sort of checking in, making sure. The first one, of course, was about knowledge, for those that are new, and it was Jean Auel's book on the land of the Painted Caves, and we were just talking about how the human race accumulates knowledge and how it acquires knowledge. So we had a really interesting discussion, I think, about that. Last time we talked about Eric Larson's Thunderstruck book with the concept of connection, and thinking about how humanity stays connected. And we had lots of discussion about modern technology as part of that, because part of the theme of the book was also how the technology of a new era facilitated, the resolution of this particular mystery that was going on. And today, of course, we're using Claude Cussler's book, Arctic Drift, and that has a lot of survival themes running through that. And next month will be T.C. Boyle's When the Killing's Done, which is about next month, about looking at concepts related to nature and what it means for something to be natural. So there should be lots of fun discussions there as well. So, all right, fess up, Mary. Did you read the book?
I read the book. I was done with it more than a week ago.
Excellent. And how many read the entire book? Okay. You're out. Sorry.
I'll keep my mouth shut.
No, absolutely not. Just kidding. No, that's great. Oh, the first time we had a few that didn't quite get through it all. Mary was one, of course. I'm picking on her because.
Yes, he is.
So, what did you think of the book? Who's got a comment about how he orchestrated things in the book, or just how you felt about the book in general? Yes.
Well, I'd never heard of Clyde Cussler, whatever his name is, before. I didn't know he'd written 22 books. Sorry. I read, but I guess I don't read that. But anyway, so I started reading it, and I like literally just finished Thunderstruck, and then I went into this, and I'm like reading about it. I'm like, oh wow, like I've never heard of this expedition before. And then I kind of went through and figured out that it was all fictional. I didn't bother to look at it. So, but I thought it was kind of odd that the way that they kind of transpose, I think that's the right word, kind of like the way that Thunderstruck did. They were like the two stories that kind of interlaced, and it was,
Interconnected.
yeah. So
Usually when I read something that has historical, it's fiction, but it's historical, read a story about Abraham Lincoln, I can separate, I know enough about history to be able to separate the fiction part. This one had me stumped because I thought, was there really an expedition like that? I didn't know anything about it.
Are there like the Royal Geographic
Yeah,
Islands? Do those exist?
I had to stop.
I didn't look into it.
I had to stop and actually go back and go to the internet to find out that there really was a captain that abandoned his ships, and that made it a little easier but I was really, when I started reading it through a good part of the book, I thought, I didn't have that distinction between the fiction and the reality.
Well, that's a good thing, though, isn't it? I mean, to be reading something and to be so wrapped up in it that you really think it's probably could be real.
I had a giggle when I reached the part, the page where he inserted himself into the story.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he does that in every book.
Just
But I think he does that in all his books, I'm
Oh,
not
does he?
certain.
Yeah.
I think so.
He's one of my favorite writers
Yeah.
just to relax and enjoy something. And when I first read him, I told my husband, he reminds me of Steven Seagal movies.
No.
He reminds me of Steven Seagal. And then as you get into more and more of his books, he's gradually, you know, explaining historical things, so not only is the book is exciting, but it actually begins to make you aware of different types of things that are happening in the world, and
Yeah.
you start really realizing, you know, that, you know, some of this is true. And then he does have his real Numa that he started.
He also has an Oregon series that's really, really good. And after I read this book, I got another one of his out with the Oregon series. It's about a computer that takes over all the computers in the world. And that really it could take over every computer in the world.
I've read a lot
That
of
was an
his
interesting
books.
concept.
I stopped reading them after a while because the plots started coinciding and seeming familiar, and so I stopped reading them because I look at the title and think, did I read this one already or didn't I?
You get over it.
So it's been a while, so I kind of enjoyed this one because it was separate from the others I had read, and I was able to focus on it and not think, well, this is just like so-and-so book from before, you know.
Wasn't anybody bothered by how perfectly he gets out of everything?
Oh, yeah.
That drives me nuts, come on.
His survival skills are
I
amazing.
gotta have a little more realism
I know.
in the story. I would not choose to read another one of his
Oh,
books,
oh,
no.
I really like
The
it.
history part was interesting.
You have to take a break.
His
Yeah,
alter ego
exactly.
is Dirk Pitt, don't you think?
I was
He is
very
different.
glad that he had put in to his story the evil oligarch with all the money who wanted, no matter what was happening in the environment, wanted everything for himself.
Yeah. Do you think that you just sort of touched on another topic I had about the book in the sense that he does escape everything. And it reminds me of the show 24, if any of you ever watched that
Oh,
show.
yes.
And Jack gets out of everything, He never goes to the bathroom and he continues to fight evil for 24 hours or whatever it is he's doing.
And he can get to the other side of town in one commercial. I
Yes.
love that.
Exactly. So, but given all of that, do you think that it's, did you like the idea of connecting like something so far in the past with something so current? I mean, was that something that was useful, do you think, in this book?
That something in the past could influence so heavily what something's going on today, and you don't know the two are going to intersect.
Mhm.
Yeah. I like that.
I think that's how history should be taught or brought to the attention of students. And I know sometimes I feel that it's, okay, this happened on this date, these people were involved, memorize it, write it on, you know what I'm saying? That's what I see a lot of times, unfortunately. Not my teachers at school, this goes on YouTube, but I've seen it before. I don't wanna say that. I see it at my school, but I've seen it with teachers before.
Well, I think you're talking about how you make history relevant.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And even though I'm then surprised, but then I have an advantage because I'm a librarian and happen to know that it was a novel, but it's so realistic that everyone was impressed by his realism. Speaks highly of an author, I think.
What do you think of the environmental issues? I was a little perplexed by all the greed, all the intense greed this guy had to sacrifice the entire world for that. Do you think that's realistic?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If there's money involved?
I have been, I think it's.
See, and I felt he demonized, I thought he demonized this fellow, but I thought it was way to the extreme. I realize money talks and people do things for money, but I don't know, I guess I'm just
An
a positive
optimist?
thinker, but I thought it was way to the extreme.
And it reminded me of the U.S. manufacturers and others who helped to make all the parts that went for the Jewish camps or the gas chambers, and that sort of profiting and looking the other way and, doing what was best for them. That's what I kept thinking of when you're looking at the greed of that oligarch. It really was.
Yeah, you do have to wonder in times like these, do you think the environmental situation is realistic? Of course, I guess it matters if you're one who recognizes global warming as global warming and the impact that's going to have. But I'm just curious about whether you thought that was a good theme to have in this book, or whether, I mean, I'm told it's controversial. For me, I don't know, but for some, I'm told it's controversial, so I'm just
I
wondering.
took an adult course over at Fireland several years ago that described in Michigan and Wisconsin, there were a total of 3 or 4 mountain ranges at one time or another, and they have, each one has eroded, and then another one built up. If that could happen so many times way back in the past, why should it not be happening again as a part of nature? As a normal part of where this earth is going. We
Okay,
had an ice age, everything melted down,
Mhm.
so why should it not continue melting down? And then suddenly it's gonna freeze again? I don't know. Why should it not?
Okay, so you're seeing the global warming as a natural occurring cycle as opposed to something that humans have just
Read
made.
National Geographic and Smithsonian, it's in there all the time about all these, you find fossils in the desert where the seabeds used to be.
And I completely agree, but the thing is with global warming, we're digging out carbon-based fuels, burning them, and impacting, that's the yes,
That's true,
there
too.
are natural cycles, but we're by digging up the, the coal and the oil and the, and putting that into our environment, we don't know, like.
And how much of it is truly natural and we're not causing it at all?
You can't,
How can you deny what humans are doing?
yeah.
We're definitely
Have
influencing
you
and
seen
impacting
pictures
the
of
world.
Beijing and China with,
Oh, yeah.
you know what I'm saying? I mean, how can you, yes, I know,
How
and
can
I
it not be
agree that
happening
there's.
in an influenced world, right?
There's cycles, obviously there's cycles, depending on the tilt and the distance and the geological, the fault lines and all, all that stuff, absolutely. And is it natural that we are gonna go into some warmings? Absolutely, possibly, but we have to look at what we're doing right now,
And I think many of us are.
Oh,
But you got so many, going back to the power structure,
yeah,
you got so many power structures that don't really care.
oh, yeah.
And they're after just the power.
Why are
And they figure, what can I do about it? And they'll just keep going for the power without stopping to think of the future influence.
Why are we not pitching a fit about Beijing right now? Instead, we're, freaking out about,
Justin Bieber.
Well, it's kind of
Yeah,
hard to
the rest
impact
of-
other people's cultures too, and the thing of it is, when you look at when we started populating this country, for example, the Black Swamp area, people came in, cut down all the trees and made it farmland, and, nobody stopped us from taking that
True.
step, and yet when people are cutting down the rainforest, we get upset about it and say they shouldn't be doing it. Who's to say we should keep them from doing what they want to do when we came along and did what we wanted to do? It's kind of a,
I think maybe we're smarter now, though, when we recognize that those actions result in losses of species like crazy.
In this part of the world, other
No.
parts of the world have to catch up with that smart.
It isn't gonna take them long in China.
But you know what I think is happening? Part of it's global warming, but I think the world, the earth is changing as it always has by evolving and evolving, and not only from global warming, but from living out here where the marshes are and were, you can see, and a lot of it's human problems, our whole biological system is changed so much. We have those phragmites everywhere. They never used to exist here. Those were brought in. I don't know how they came, but they've destroyed a lot of the cattails, a lot of the purple mallow bushes. So when you drive through that area, they're gone. And I remember them saying over at Maggie Marsh that certain birds will not want those kind of weeds. They need other types of greens to live in. So that's being moved, and nobody's stopping it. They tried to do it at Maggie Marsh, but they have no luck. So I went to a program there about it because it concerned me. And they said that's not the only thing that's invasive. They have lilies, the orange daylilies that are growing, those are invasive. If you go south, you see the, I don't know what they call it, the vine that's over everything.
Oh,
Kudzu.
kudzu.
Right, and then you have, the fish, we've seen fish that are changing in the lake, like the carp that are coming, and these are all coming, and I don't know how we can stop it. I think it's just, eventually, I would like to be back here in 100 years and see what the whole landscape looks like. I think it's something that's just happening, and I don't know what we can do except survive by learning how to exist with it.
Well, it brings up, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ollie.
I was in Tanzania 10 years ago and I said, oh, look, Phragmites.
You
And
saw
know
them
what
there
our
too?
guide said? They're so invasive. That's in Tanzania. So they're
Yeah, we
everywhere.
were in Mozambique, and we were driving down the river, and I saw them there, and I asked the man, I said, what are those? Are those natural here? He said, no, they're invasive. And they're over in
Where
South
do they
Africa.
belong?
No birds can eat anything on them, no animals can eat the roots, there's nothing constructive about those things.
You can use it as thatch on your roof.
Yes,
Value.
right.
That's the only positive I've ever heard.
This makes me want to ask a question about, how the issue of survival, technology, and things do affect your lives. So you bridged right into a question I had, so I'm just wondering if there's other kinds of things you can think of that relate to, personally for you, in terms of your community or your environment, in terms of survival. Do you know what I'm asking, or?
Well, we see a little bit of it day to day here. We depend upon our electronics, our cell phone, our wireless printer, our laptops. And yet, if something goes awry or goes amiss or you're without power, people are dead in the water, so to speak, about getting the job done, the task at hand, or communicating with someone else, be it schoolwork or your career or just communication.
And people are getting generators now. I mean, think of all those years growing up, we didn't have generators.
What about the doomsday prepper people? What about that?
Food.
Well, there's a book, it's called 1 Second After, and it's about electronic pulse theft, at least the United States, without any power, any computers. And it's about a year in the life of this town after that happens. And it's very interesting how they go back to the ones that knew how to hunt, the ones that had the older rifles that they could make their own shotgun pellets from, the ones that perhaps had a car from the 1950s that didn't have a computer chip in it, although they couldn't get gas for it, and just about survival after that. And it's how life changed, even to things like if you're a diabetic and they are not making insulin. So what insulin you can find, and then if you can find it, you have to keep it cold. In the story, the man was keeping it cold in the toilet tank because that was cold, cooler water. But then eventually they ran out and the daughter died. But it was a very interesting thing. I think when you talk about global warming versus whether it's man-made or natural cycles of the earth, I think we're maybe adding to it, but it's natural cycle of the earth. But I think it's also a race between our technologies and our science and our knowledge and perhaps the earth trying to right itself. So population's growing, we're polluting. Earth is fighting back a little bit. And who's going to win? And at what point will population get to the point where we can keep ourselves alive, we can keep ourselves fed, we can keep ourselves warm with technology? But then what are we going to use? We're going to use technology to keep ourselves from growing, from having a population overgrowth. And what will nature, Earth, do in response to that? And this is maybe thousands and millions of years down the road, but
Or in some
That's all.
models, not very far.
or depending on
Yeah,
where you are.
Sustainability models really
Right.
don't speak very encouragingly about,
Mhm.
the population is way
Right.
overpopulated now.
And you have a story like this where there's, hope for, but there is some element that they haven't found yet that will make them be able to take something we're polluting the earth with and turn it into a renewable energy source. So when you read a story like this, you're always like, oh yes, there is that perfect answer. But maybe there isn't, so you know, a
Well,
lot
I
of
think
things.
part of our culture has that as one of its themes, is that we will always, at the last minute, come up with a solution.
Yeah.
And, you know, do you think that's realistic?
So,
Yeah, we hope so, but, I mean, is it realistic to just assume that we can always, at the last minute, come up, as they did in the book, you know, come up with a solution?
Sorry.
And the second thing I had about, I was wanted to cover about this was the capitalistic society that we live in. Does that encourage being stewards of our environment? And then how can we change that? How do you change something like that?
Well, you know, in a way it does, because if you can find a technology that improves things and make money on it, even though you're acting as a capitalist, you're making money on something that's beneficial to humankind. You know, it's not that every capitalist idea decimates the country. I mean, that just isn't true. There are a lot of capitalistic things that have been good for the country, or good for mankind. You know, so if you can come up with some technology that would take carbon dioxide, as they did in the book, and convert it, you'd make a fortune, and you'd be a capitalist, but you'd still be doing something for mankind.
I think a lot of the damage that's been done has been accidental. The invention of plastics, you know, we looked at that way back when as, oh my goodness, this is so good, you know, things are lightweight, we don't carry all those glass bottles from the grocery store, it's convenient, it's cheaper, but what about the cancer and all the side effects of all this plastic? We didn't know that when it wasn't being developed to be a detrimental thing, but it turned out to be. We're probably worse off because of that technology and that so-called improvement in our lives.
And all of the oceans now are floating. A lot of those plastic debris, as we've seen when they're trying to search for the Malaysian airplane. They're finding little bits of plastic everywhere.
That's
And
something
our animals in the ocean are eating them.
I fight with at my school is trying to, develop a recycling program and doing, and teaching, making it like habit to kids to just recycle, I've written grants to get little, like, big pop bottles, to do that, but I wish there was a market for it. I mean, people don't do it because why would you do it? But if there was some kind of monetary like benefit behind doing it, I think
But
people might be more.
I think it's true that
Yeah.
capitalism has a good side and a bad side, and it's up to us to determine how it is used and create the culture that will use the good side.
You can believe it, my children's school, there's a teacher there that actually is teaching that global warming is all a fiction. And that the changes we're seeing are a result of humankind's sins, and it's just we're heading toward the end of the world.
Oh, that's not good.
Public school? No, it's in Catholic.
Okay.
The big global research that came out on global warming, they just released that pocket sort of preview on last week, I think it was. The big result, the study hasn't come out itself for review. Do you know what I'm talking about? It was led by, there are, I think it said 29 nations, scientists.
The Kyoto report?
I don't remember. I was reading the report, listening to NPR, and I can't remember which group was behind it, but I know that it involved a global effort, and they were talking about the changes, the measurable changes that we've seen, and it's really scary because you look at it and think, okay, can we make changes fast enough to stop this to a point that our children's grandchildren will actually have something to do, that there'll be a world here for them to actually live upon. But at the same time, if you have people preaching at the other end who say, there's nothing we can do to stop it, then it's really becomes a doomsday scenario.
We want to look at the video on Clive Cussler, but I attended an Earthwatch program when I was running Earthwatch back in the late 1980s, and at that time it was all about global warming, and which was 20-some years ago, 25 years ago or so. And they, at that point, we were predicting some really serious issues, and they had some presentations that were very powerful. And it makes you wonder, why doesn't everybody just get on this bandwagon and do something?
Lazy.
I used to get really depressed about it, and then I stopped because I wasn't helping that. But it's a really tough issue.
Isn't it being moved into the term of climate change rather than global warming?
Yeah, and it
Do
really
that more so that people will accept, people that don't think it's global warming, accept climate change. as a
Except
term.
climate change sort of suggests that it's natural,
Right.
it's meant to be, as
Oh, I
opposed to
don't know.
the whole globe itself is
Yeah.
changing.
I don't see it that way.
I mean, which part of the Arctic melting don't people get?
I
The
know.
polar bears cannot swim from
But
one
there-
ice floe to another because they're
Yeah.
too far apart now and they're
Yeah.
gonna drown.
But there are people who say, if this is, we look at our winter, how could this be global warming? If it's
Oh,
so,
yeah.
it's so cold.
They had a sign.
That's where I was gonna say is you have to watch.
Yeah, the big storms that are coming.
Yeah, they had a sign at the fire station right outside the tip, global warming with a big question mark, Don't do this.
But
Don't
there are things, certainly a lot more that can be done, and certainly other countries like India and China have a long way to go. But really, when you look around, just around here, there are a lot of things that have been done. I mean, if you just look at the recycling trash program, that, 20 years ago, nobody had ever thought about putting those big recycle cans in everybody's yard and having people recycle. And, I guess I'm older than most of you, but if I look back to when I was in high school and lived in a city of Cleveland where there was steel mills and, one of my favorite smells, I'm sorry, is diesel smell of a bus, because it reminds me of going across Cleveland to go to school. And when you look at the pollution there and how much better it is now, and even in California, it used to be so bad in those valleys, and how we have cleaned up a lot. Our area is a lot cleaner now in this country than it used to be. Unfortunately, the other countries can't move along fast enough, I think, to.
Well, yeah, and the issue is more holistic. We have a lot of other problems with the pesticides and the fertilizers and the things that we use to help with farming, and that's causing all kinds of global issues as well. And so you really need to be very conscious about a lot of different things when you're trying to resolve these, and it's just a tremendous change, I think. Okay.